Welcome to the Mount Pleasant Podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people of Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor, the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. May 3rd, there's going to be a big event coming up in Mount Pleasant, one that I think you're going to want to be a part of, and it's one we're talking about today here on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. So happy you're joining me here where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. I'm Brian Cleary, joined by Sarkis Ohanessian, who is the volunteer race director for this event that is going to benefit Tunnels to Towers. Sarkis, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. Before we get into the specifics of the event itself, maybe people aren't all aware of what Tunnel to Towers is all about. Why don't you explain what your organization does?
Sure thing, Brian. Thank you for having me. So Tunnel to Towers was born from the tragic events that happened in 9/11. If you're 40 years old and above, you kind of remember where you were that day when 9/11 hit. So Tunnel to Towers was basically born out of that event. The primary mission is to do good, and the foundation helps not only those that have lost their lives in the military or first responders, but also aids the homeless vets. So it's a mission of ours to promote that, to educate folks on 9/11, and to make sure that we always remember that day.
Sarkis, how was it that you personally got involved with the organization?
I retired from law enforcement in Southern California after about 34 years of service and moved out to South Carolina. Prior to that, 2021 was a very bad year for us in the agency I worked for. We lost a couple of guys. One of them was murdered tragically. Tunnel to Towers stepped in and actually paid off the mortgage of both officers that lost their lives. When a husband, a breadwinner, dies tragically, wife and kids are basically stranded. And one of the things that helps is that mortgage-free home, and that's what Tunnel to Towers does.
Now, there was a Tunnel to Towers event in the Palmetto State last year, one in our state capital, Columbia. What was it that brought the event to Mount Pleasant this year?
So we have over 80 events nationwide a year. When I moved here, I looked around and said, okay, there's one in Myrtle Beach, there's one in Columbia. How about one here in the Low Country? And worked out perfectly to bring it here to Mount Pleasant.
Well, we're looking forward to the event, so let's get into the details. We're talking about Sunday, May 3rd. Tell me about the 5K event.
Absolutely. It's going to be at the Park West facility here in Mount Pleasant on the north side of town. Hopefully we get enough registrants to come out. This is part of the education process of just teaching folks about Tunnel to Towers and what we're doing and bringing folks out to run this special events to honor our servicemen and women.
So a lot of times there's a 5K event that happens in the Low Country. It's more fun and people just come out for that. So for somebody who's a serious runner, should they consider running in this 5K event?
Absolutely. I think every runner knows they follow the run no matter where it is. But this is more of a special event. I think it'll stand out because we want you to run in the steps of Stephen Siller. And I'll talk a little bit about that, on who Stephen was and his story and why Tunnel to Towers even exists.
May 3rd is this big event in Mount Pleasant. We want to make it huge. This should be a big event to help Tunnels for Towers. It's the first 5K event for Tunnel for Towers that'll be happening in the Low Country. And it's our subject today here where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. Thanks for joining us here today on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, and the volunteer race director, a guy who's come from the other side of the country to bring this event to us, is Sarkis Ohanessian, and he is our guest today here on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. So before we get into Stephen's story, which is a great story, I'm so glad you're going to share it. Let's talk about the specialness of this event, because this isn't just going to be your typical 5K run 3.1 miles and that's it.
We want folks that are going to register and come out and run this event to actually be spiritually there with Stephen when he took his last run. And that's the importance of our run, climb, and walk events, which is a series Tunnel to Towers puts on. So this is one of 80 events that we're doing annually. We just want people to come out, families, come out and support your heroes and meet some of the firefighters that are going to be there in town, along with the law enforcement officers and military folks that are going to participate. So it's going to be a family-oriented event.
Sarkis, if I do want to get involved with the race, what's the first step that I need to take?
All you have to do is just go to tunneltotowers.org and go to their national events series. You'll drop down and find the national events under runs, the 5Ks, and you find a town that's near you, and just join right there on the website.
Now, if I want to help out, maybe I'm not a runner. Are there volunteer opportunities? What else do you need to make this the event the success it's going to be?
Absolutely. Volunteers. We're still needing volunteers on the race track, along with passing out waters and just cheering folks on. There is a tab there you can actually go to and click it and volunteer and put in your information, and I will get to you directly.
Well, let's motivate people to be a part of this event, because you know Stephen's story, Sarkis. So why don't you explain that and show how this Tunnel to Towers organization grew and became what it is today?
Sure. So Stephen was one of 7 children, big family. Mom and dad passed away when he was very young. He was about 8 years old. He was raised by his brothers and family members. Stephen became a firefighter. He became a firefighter in New York's finest fire department. He was part of Squad 1 in Brooklyn. So Stephen was off on 9/11. He was actually heading to play golf with his brothers. And he heard the situation, the chaos happening on his radio, called his wife and said, "Hey, let my brothers know I will not be going to the golf game. I'm heading straight to work." So by the time Stephen got to his station, he realized his squad had already left. He packed 60 pounds of gear into his truck and drove it to the Brooklyn Tunnel, where he ended up putting his equipment on and ran in the Brooklyn Tunnel to the towers, which what we're trying to do with our 5Ks is basically being in the footsteps of Stephen, running to the towers. And unfortunately, on that day, he perished along with his brothers at work.
Just the sacrifice there alone. I mean, here's a guy who was supposed to be off work, but took his job seriously enough, his responsibility, and went in there and ended up losing his life. And hopefully that will motivate some people to come out and be a part of this event on May 3rd. And as we talk about this event as a benefit for Tunnel to Towers, how does that organization benefit? What is it that I'm doing that day that helps Tunnel to Towers?
The foundation itself has raised over $1 billion since its inception and has put all those funds back into their programs when it comes to veteran assistance, mortgage-free homes, smart homes for catastrophically injured service members. So all that money, about 93% of those funds have gone directly to their programs to help those in need.
And that's a big point something to point out, because when a charity is giving back so much money, 93 cents of every dollar you guys get goes to the people who need it.
Yes, sir. And I tell people all the time to look at those charity ratings and go investigate it yourself, and you'll find where the foundation stands in those ratings.
And so we're all on the same page, Sarkis. You did say billion with a B.
That is correct, sir. Yeah.
But yet the need is still out there for first responders and their families.
Of course, unfortunately, a line of death doesn't stop, correct? So as more families are in need, this foundation is going to continue to support those folks.
In 1982, it was East Cooper Magazine. Now it's Mount Pleasant Magazine. Mount Pleasant Magazine is about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Your community, your magazine. Mount Pleasant Magazine.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant Podcast.
We get to go a little deeper than we do in the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine here on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary. Today we're talking about an event that we hope that you will come out and be a part of, somehow support. It happens on May 3rd. It's a Tunnel to Towers 5K event for the first time in Mount Pleasant, and the volunteer race director of the event joins me today here on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. He is Sarkis Ohanessian. Sarkis, I have to ask about the name. What is that? Alien, Mars? Where does that come from?
It's actually Armenian.
Armenian. All right. And what was it that drove you from the West Coast to come and ultimately settle here in South Carolina?
At some point in your career in law enforcement, you hope that you can retire and you still have your health. So I retired after 34 years in law enforcement in Southern California. I finished with the largest agency down there, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, after 26 years with them, and moved my family and came to South Carolina.
How big is your family, sir?
One boy, one girl, and that's enough.
So now that you're here in the Palmetto State, the question, of course, that we ask everybody who's on the Mount Pleasant podcast, Clemson, South Carolina, or do you not really have a dog in that fight?
My daughter, I think, is going to end up in South Carolina. So that's what she's saying. So I'm going to have to be a South Carolina dad, I guess.
And then the other question we've got to ask about here in the Low Country, you're a fan of shrimp, I hope. And if so, what way do you prefer to have your shrimp served? If you go in a restaurant, how do you order your shrimp?
I heard there's 30 some odd ways to cook shrimp, and I'll eat all of them. That's correct.
Stand up and take one for the team. We love that. Now, Sarkis, obviously, this has all come about due to 9/11. We're 25 years, hard to believe. It's a quarter of a century has gone on. Can you explain to people why do you think it still matters that we keep that 9/11 in still our focus?
This year actually is the 25th year anniversary of 9/11, and it's a little more special for us what the foundation's doing. They're going to actually drive around a big piece of steel from one of the towers, and it's going to go all around the nation. It's going to start May 2nd is going to kick off, and through August, it's going to make a whole loop throughout the country, just to make sure people kind of remember what that signifies. It's more of those that sacrificed, not just the 343 firefighters that perished or the 72 law enforcement officers that perished. We lost over 2,100 people in those buildings, but if it wasn't for those heroes that climbed those steps and cleared folks, we would have had more tragic numbers than that, of course. 25-year anniversary. This is a pretty sombering event every year, and I do have a little more of a story that may or may not make an impact of us, just where we were on that day. 3 days prior to 9/11, I was in the North Tower. I was on the observation deck. I went to New York with two of my best friends. We went there to visit family and hang out. 3 days prior, I was in the North Tower. Decided the next day to fly back because I had work. My two best friends remained behind because they wanted to see a ball game. They got stuck in the airport that morning of 9/11. It took them about a week to get home to Southern California. But 3 days later, that could have been me in that building. Why someone else and not me? That's the type of things that go through our heads on that day. Yeah,
talk about putting a personal touch on it to know that you were that close to that event when it happened. There's almost a generation of people who weren't alive when that happened.
Correct.
And just the importance of keeping this forefront is one of the things this event will do. What about folks in the community? Have you gotten some good community support for the May 3rd event?
We have. Law enforcement has been a great help here. The fire department has been a great help. We've passed out a lot of flyers to folks. Runners usually will kind of register at the last minute. Sometimes they're just going from event to event. So as of yesterday, actually, we had about 53 runners registered and raised about $1,700, which is appreciated. But again, for the foundation, it's not how much money we're getting. It's about bringing community together and just supporting our heroes and those that are pretty much, running through danger every day versus running away from it.
Sarkis, what do you think your biggest challenge has been to this point in terms of getting this event together?
I have great support from the foundation. My business partner on the foundation side, she's been great. They do everything for me. Basically, I am the boots on the ground. I do have my Stevens squad, which I have a group of 7 to 8 people that are going to be helping out with the event on that morning. But it's more of just getting the word out. And so far, so good. We're about a month away, so we'll see where that goes. And hopefully every year it grows. And as it grows, we may move the venue to Patriots Point. How much more patriotic can you be than being next to the USS Yorktown? So that would be a great event.
Seriously. Well, hopefully we're going to grow it and we'll have a big kickoff first year. You mentioned the 60 pounds, and I've been to different runs and stuff and different events. That's a figure. Now, will we see some folks on May 3rd that'll be actually doing the run with the 60 pounds?
I don't know if there's going to be any firemen out there that are going to want to do that with the 60 pounds. It's going to depend on the person, of course.
Obviously, in your line of work, a little different than firefighters, but certainly a police officer, you carry some additional thing. Yeah. So you know kind of what you can relate to what that is like.
Yeah, we have a lot of officers that run with their gear, 15-pound, whether it's belts, putting on their bulletproof vests and stuff like that. So about 15 pounds is the average, and we've had folks run in that along with their boots, which is pretty tough to do for 3 miles. Want to be in those footsteps and feel what Stephen went through on that day.
So you've touched on it a little bit, Sarkis, but at the end of the day, May 3rd, how will you measure success?
Measuring success for me, first year, first annual, it's all about, even if I get 50 people out there or 100 people out there, just to be together underneath that big flag that's going to be hanging from a fire truck. I think that is going to be the perfect day for us.
So what we want to do is get as many people as possible that are watching the podcast, that are hearing about it, whether you're in Mount Pleasant, wherever you're at in the Low Country, to come down and be a part of the event. So again, Sarkis, the way that I can get involved in the event is how?
Just go to t2t.org and go to the website itself, look at the national events and drop down to the races and find the local one. I'm actually going to run in the Greenville event that's coming up next weekend. I'm going to drive up to Greenville and run that event to support the other race director there that day. So it's just about being there, being with folks. I'm not a 6-minute runner. I'm in the 10s and 11s, so which is perfectly fine. And have a beer afterwards. So that'd be great.
Now, that is my kind of run. Absolutely, positively. We want you to be a part of it. The Park West Recreation Complex on Sunday, May 3rd. This is an opportunity for you to support Tunnel to Towers. It's an amazing nonprofit organization that does such great work for the families of those first responders and folks that we have lost in the line of duty. Sarkis, first of all, let me just say thank you for not only for joining us today, but you've brought this event to the Low Country. I think it's going to be an important event for people to be a part of.
Brian, thank you. Thank you to your listeners. Thank you for the podcast. Really appreciate you having me on.
We want to see you May 3rd. It'll be a huge event in Mount Pleasant. And if it's happening in Mount Pleasant, you hear about it, read about it in the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine, and hear about it here on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant Podcast, your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.